Well, welcome back, everyone, to this, our 15th episode as we continue our journey through the Bible. We're drawing to the end of the history sections of the scriptures, finishing our kind of second journey through the story of the kings of Israel and Judah, and moving into the period of the exile as it is known, and then back again to Israel. We start our readings for this week with David's farewell and Solomon's succession, taking the kingdom and beginning his reign, and all of the wonderful things that Solomon did. I found myself kind of struck by a phrase that gets used in Second Chronicles in my translation, and I'm not sure what the other translations, but with each of the successions, or most all of the successions, it speaks of, in Second Chronicles 1:1, Solomon, son of David, took firm hold of his kingdom. I'm not sure what that necessarily says, but that tends to be the phrase that the chronicler uses to describe succession. We move into Solomon building the temple and get a much longer description in Chronicles of both the building and the dedicating of the temple.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that struck me there was David was very aware what was going on. And you don't see that in the other ones. I was thinking David was already dead when Solomon was building, and he's kind of watching as they're going along. I mean, giving him the instructions, say, here's what you got to do. It was different in the Chronicles piece that struck out to me when he's there now and telling me this is what it is and what you're doing and this is what you're supposed to do. And it was a different for me in this aspect, and a lot of it with Chronicles was just seeing a little bit more detail, as you said, in some areas. But I think in the one here that really stuck out to me, where's it at, was Solomon. When he's after he builds it and he goes through, he offers. It's in chapter 6. It's verse 14. It's almost like a praise, 14, 15, that he gives, and it was something different that I didn't notice when he says, "Lord God of Israel, there's no God like you in heaven or on earth. You keep the covenant and show loyalty to your servants who walk before you with all their heart. This is the covenant you kept with your servant David, my father, which you promised him. Today you have fulfilled what you promised." And it was just one of those scenarios where you see Solomon truly worshiping and giving thanks for the things he'd done that I didn't necessarily see it in the Kings, but you saw a more human side, I think, of Solomon in these verses, of what he actually did, more of the work that he actually did. And it was just neat to me to see that part of him come out.
Reading the prayer of dedication always draws me back to the construction of the church that we built at Topsail. As the folks here at St. James know, I was the founding pastor of Faith Harbor United Methodist Church down at Topsail. When we finally got to construction, we had poured the foundation, which was a major endeavor for a variety of reasons, but nonetheless, the foundation had been poured, and I really felt like I needed to mark it somehow, to mark that moment and mark the foundation of it. Eventually, after the concrete had cured, we had People with markers go around and write blessings on the foundation. But before it cured, I wrote in the corner 2 Chronicles 6:20 for that declaration of Solomon. May your eyes be open day and night toward this house, toward the place where you have resolved to make your name abide. May you heed the prayer that your servant offers toward this place. And that was just a real special moment. My children and I went and took a nail and wrote 2 Chronicles 6:20. It's hard to write in wet concrete, and so that was as much as we could. I thought about writing the verse itself, but that was all I could carve into it.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the other things that stuck out to me in this like a prayer of dedication, whatever he's doing, is how much he really speaks for his people. So many times he lists these scenarios. If someone has sinned against you, but then they pray, give thanks to your name and turn from this, and then listen from heaven and forgive them their sins. And another time he'll say the same thing. Or if there's a famine or a plague or someone's enemies attack them, whenever there's a prayer, an individual turns from their ways, or they have this pain or suffering, listen and forgive their act and repay each person. It was just an amazing. It reminded me so much, and we say this as pastors, because we so much, and we do here, praying for our congregation, praying for the people, and to see Solomon here really speaking out to God, to speak to to forgive those who're there, to support them to do this wherever they're coming from. He even prays for those who come from a distant country. He's given all these prayers, and it just reminded me so much of what we do as pastors when we're praying for the people in our churches or praying for our communities, and it was just very touching to me, in this aspect, seeing this part of Solomon. And he even says in 36, when they sin against you, because there is no one who doesn't sin, and you become angry with them and hand them over to an enemy who takes, but whether if they change their heart in whatever land they're held captive, turning back and begging, and if they return to you with all their heart, then pray, and concerning their land which you give them, then listen to their prayer and request, and do what is right for them, and forgive your people for who have sinned against you. It was just it was just that part of the prayers when he finishes, like almost that is just, to me, just touching.
That sense of the people of faith having a burden for others, I think, is a crucial part. I think we come in today in this week's reading to that iconic verse of 2 Chronicles 7:14 that gets bandied about in a variety of ways and places, where God says, when my people who bear my name humble themselves, pray and seek my favor, and turn from their evil ways, I will hear in my heavenly abode and forgive their sins and heal their land. I think for me, one of the crucial elements of that is this phrasing of, when my people who bear my name. I think that, that Scripture calls us as the people of faith to be the ones that pray for the broader society, that pray for the rest of the world. For me, and I don't, we don't want to get too far afield into specifics, but for me, the problem of Christian nationalism is that it makes people who don't have faith behave as if they do, rather than us who have faith behaving from our faith to impact the world.
Absolutely. Really, really, really good word. Yes, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with all that.
Well, we move on to the story of the Queen of Sheba. Pastor Dan already knows that I have a great interest in this particular part of the story. Many of the folks here at St. James have already heard me say that probably the number one place on my bucket list to visit is the nation of Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is probably Sheba. That's one of the primary theories of where this land of Sheba is, that the queen had come across and up what is now Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula to Israel. And she is fascinated by the by all of the wisdom and wonders of Solomon. I started to say enamored, but the again, as Pastor Dan knows, the Ethiopian version of this story, of the legend, is that the Queen of Sheba became involved with King Solomon, and when she left, she carried within her the child that would be the first emperor of Ethiopia, Menelaic.
It was interesting with her too in this in verse 8 when you don't necessarily hear the queen, but she she says, "Bless the Lord your God, because he was pleased to put you on the throne as king for the Lord your God, because your God loved Israel and wanted to establish him forever. He has made you their king to uphold justice and righteousness." That she's so impressed that she realizes that this is actually someone that's appointed by God to do this. And you don't, I don't remember that part in the last one. It could have been there and just missed it. But it just stuck out to me in this aspect too, how she is even admitting how God has blessed Solomon in this, to put him in this place for this time, to make sure that justice and righteousness are being held for the Israelites, the group there.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that when she says, "Blessed is the Lord your God," she is actually using that unutterable name of God. Mm-hmm. That Lord, is, when it's in all caps, like it is in our scriptures, is the unutterable name of God.
Yes.
Well, Solomon dies. We again see the split of the kingdom of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Don't see the story quite in the same way it is in Kings. Jeroboam comes out a lot better in Chronicles
for sure
than he did in Kings. In Chronicles, it's all Rehoboam's fault, and breaking away. Eventually, Rehoboam comes back, attacks Jerusalem, and steals from the treasury. And there is a great concern in Chronicles around the place of the temple itself. The elements that are in the temple, the building, the care for it, and the worship of it, worship that occurs in it, not worship of the building.
And even seeing, in the part in these versions where he comes into rule, even though he says, when about seeing how the people have basically turned from their ways in that aspect, he was ready to destroy them, but because they did turn in the thing, he didn't. He said he would deliver them in a little while. Doesn't put out everything on them right now, but it was just that big difference in here, and it goes from there to in this aspect where Rehoboam goes through, and then Rehoboam eventually passes away, and it continues on with Abijah now becoming ruler over there, and in his aspect, and another king that wasn't one that was one of the good ones, so to speak, as you go through it, as we go through these and just hearing them and going through and seeing which ones have done the good and which ones have not done good. We see once how he turned and didn't follow the ways of the thing in these aspects. And then as they continue on, we continue to go through, and I don't know if it's Asa or Asa, however you say it, but anyway, he becomes a king next and does good. You hear a little bit about him, of how he does things and how he really reforms the temple and things in here, and he really begins to do everything back. I mean, you see more of them following the instruction, the scroll of here in these. You hear a lot of it being mentioned now of how they were supposed to go back, and what the scroll that Moses gave Joshua long ago was what it said, and you see them beginning to do these things and celebrating Passovers and doing these situations of how they're going. So you see the goodness in some of them and how it works. But
I found it interesting to think about this back and forth more in Chronicles than I did in reading through Kings. Kings, for me, Kings just kind of went one right after the other, but here you got more of a sense of the good kings and the bad kings, and I every time I read the story, I find myself thinking about the citizens under the good kings and the bad kings. When Asa or however you pronounce it, as you say, reformed worship, they had the great sacrifice of rededicating the temple again and drawing everybody back. And Asa says, whoever would not worship the Lord God of Israel would be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman. And everyone took an oath. And then, you flip the page almost, and you get a new king who takes everybody all away, and they all go there. And it just makes me think about the to and fro that seems to happen in political life, whether it's here or there or any place else.
So as you go through Asa's rule, he eventually passed away, and Jehoshaphat comes in. This is one of the few instances where you get a couple good kings back to back, and even Jehoshaphat does even more. I think one of the things that impressed me in this aspect is how he had the officials and the Levites, which were the priests, teaching in Judah. I mean, that was one of the things that caught me in 17, is how he had them teaching the Lord's instructions to the people, which was what was supposed to be going on all along. But he actually assigned people to go out and to do these things, and that was just something that stuck where you can see it in here, where he actually did have the teaching. But the problem where he fell, and he done all good, but the one area where he went was he allied himself with Ahab, which was a king on the other side, which if you'll remember, you don't see it in this one, but Ahab had the experience with Elijah, and you don't read about that in Chronicles, but you'll remember the story of Ahab. He was the one who Elijah had all of this, but because he had this Elijah with him, and he had this thing of people as good as he did, it led to his initial unfaithfulness of not trusting in God, because he allied with Ahab to work together instead of realizing that God had been there. And even though he was saved in battle, Ahab wasn't, but he did. Jehoshaphat himself was saved, but just to think how easy it is for just one little thing. You wouldn't think, well, he did it to help, but it was a thing that went against what God wanted them to do.
In talking about Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles 20, it says, the kingdom of Jehoshaphat was untroubled, and his God granted him respite on all sides.
Yeah.
And then it moves, the story moves to Jehoshaphat's son Jehoram, and it says of him, he followed the practices of the kings of Israel, doing what the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did what was displeasing to the Lord. I find myself thinking about this notion of how profoundly blind we can become in the good times. When things are untroubled and we have respite on all sides, how much easier it is in those occasions to begin to think ourselves invincible. I can do anything. I can marry Ahab's daughter. We can build some extra shrines. It's not a problem. Everything is good. When things are bad are the times that we tend to lean so strongly on God. I think I am drawn back again to that iconic part of Deuteronomy where God says to the people of Israel, when you enter the land and you live in houses that you did not build, and you eat grapes from vineyards that you did not plant, do not forget the Lord your God, because it is in those times that we so easily begin to wander away.
And that kind of brings us close to where we are finishing for today. As we will, next session, we'll get into finishing Chronicles and getting into Ezra. We hope that you have enjoyed this time with us, and this continuing to help you grow in your work. I know even with us doing it, you find things, and there just helps me grow as well, and continuing to learn about things. So we hope that you continue to join us, and we look forward to being with you again next week.
Thank you.